So I began my academic career around 22, 23 years ago as a faculty member of the residency program in our current, in one of our hospitals in the area. But what it really was impressive, and I didn't recognize this until I started to go back and remember my pathway to academic medicine, was that I began as a core faculty member of the residency program. And then after 6 months, I was appraised by the program director so that I would become her assistant program director. And I was surprised that I was offered that position because I was relatively new. And I said, well, if you want me, then yes, I will. I will do it. And then 6 months afterwards, so I had barely been a year in the hospital working as a teacher, I was called in by the administration of the hospital to ask me to become the DIO and GME director of the hospital. Again, I was also impressed. I was fairly new. I asked why, and they said, because we think you have the skills and we want you to do it. So I said, well, if you trust me, then I'll try it. And I was successful to get the full accreditation from the ACGME for institution within the next 6 months. I think that they had an accreditation visit soon. I needed someone to take care of that. And I was very successful on that. I won't go into the details, but rapidly after those experiences, which were my entrance to academic medicine, eventually my next big step was to apply for the position of pediatric chair, which became vacant because the current chair was promoted to associate dean. And I was elected to the position. And I would say that was my formal entrance into the School of Medicine as an administrator within the school. Rapidly, there was a vacancy 2 or 3 years afterwards into the position of academic dean, and the dean came and offered me the job. 9 years afterwards, there was a vacancy in the position of dean, and the board of directors of the school asked me to jump in as interim president and dean of the institution. And they told me this is going to be only for 6 months. And eventually I was interim dean and president for 2.5 years. During that period of time, our institution had dramatic changes. Eventually, there was a change of ownership. The new president asked me to stay as dean of the School of Medicine. And I've been in that position for 10 years. So that has been my pathway as dean. I have to highlight, because there have been many, many details, the fact that during that period of time, different from other deans, usually deans come from positions such as department chairs, associate deans, which I did, following the traditional path. But in my case, it wasn't that I went through search committees to search for a position and become a dean. I basically was asking to jump into the position by the people that were at that time my bosses, my deans. So I feel that has been something unique within my academic career. So other experiences that I'm sure have helped me, and I think that have been key, and I recommend that you strongly seek for those, is the fact of trying to engage into activities or positions where you can know better your institution. And the best way to do that is be part of committees in your institution. Not only be part of those committees, volunteer to lead them. Okay, that's the best way to become and to develop your own personal pathway towards leadership within your institution. And I'm sure if you do that, you're going to be able to achieve it. Sorry. Personally, I led, and I think that has been key to me. I was able to lead the self-studies for the LCME site visits. I was also a member of the task force that worked for the accreditation of the school, of the university. And those leadership roles there also helped me toward my path to becoming a dean. So I think that summarizes my path. Then I can speak about other experiences later.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Dr. Mcgregor, would you be willing to share your journey as well?
Sure, with pleasure. If you call me Joe. I looked at my birth certificate. There was no doctor. My journey is a little different. Let me be as transparent as possible. I'm one of 4 Cuban Democrats of my generation, which means I'm an old hippie. I was motivated by trying to make the world better, from going all the way back to the 60s and the 70s when we were involved heavily in those political movements. I went into medical school and eventually became a hepatologist and gastroenterologist. I became a hepatologist because Cubans had twice the incidence of liver cancer as the rest of Americans. And then towards the end of my fellowship is when Chiron Labs identified the antibody to hepatitis C, and we retested all the bloods, and about 90% were positive to the first generation of hepatitis C. But what I ended up seeing was so much inequities, including within my profession, particularly in academic medicine, and really wanting to make a change. The idea was, I was in academics early on, had very toxic experiences within the academic environment, which I still see going around in this country. A lot of it is extremely self-serving, and we're supposed to be here to serve others. My recommendation to those that want to be a dean is leadership qualities fit in not just to be a dean, but to be a chair, to be in any leadership position. But I think it should be driven by mission. The mission to make the world better, the mission to make our own academic medicine better. I was an associate dean at the University of Miami when I resigned due to what I felt was very toxic environments. They wanted to maintain me on. We agreed that I would keep a voluntary associate dean title there. Went into private practice. We started a big group in gastroenterology and colorectal surgery. We eventually expanded to about 5 states. And then FIU was starting a med school, and I became one of the founding faculty members there, and the opportunity to start a brand new, totally different curriculum. And what ended up happening there, I was there from 2007. We opened the doors in 2009, and I left in 2020. The university, it's a big public university, wanted to go in the direction of traditional medical schools with giant bench research, of which that train had left quite a while ago. Yet we have this country with its incredible disparities. We are, let's be very frank, we are a profession that is racist, sexist, xenophobic, elitist. We're also a profession that needs to get back to the virtues that should define us: humility, empathy, compassion. And that's what we should be doing as physicians. When we say how great we are in medicine in this country, we're using the wrong criteria to measure how great we are. It's not the number of patents that we have or the number of new medications that we produce, but we have to look at the health outcomes of our nation and our communities. We as physicians are supposed to be the ones that are supposed to be trying to resolve this, but we sit within our silos. Things that I never understood within our profession: when you apply to medical school, you talk about you want to save the world. You have a white coat ceremony. 2/3 of your tuition is many times paid by the public dole. And it is the indigent, uninsured patient that teaches us to be a doctor when we're on the wards. And then when we graduate, we take another oath. And then once we go into practice or in this country, we refuse to see patients that have no insurance or don't have any cash. And it's not so much that we're refusing to see them, is that we as a profession have accepted that as a social norm, which is totally unacceptable. So my trajectory into becoming a physician was to have real diversity. And the leadership that we have here is 100% diverse. Of our senior faculty here, six of us, 3 are African American, I'm Hispanic, 2 are foreign born, and there's only 2 men. We also have diversity of terminal degrees. We have a bioethicist, and she happens to chair the Cambridge Consortium for Bioethics. We have our head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It actually has a degree in education from Columbia, and her postdocs were done on terms of diversity at the University of West London. And you bring in people that have this experience, because the way we train here is a little different. We started the very first new curriculum in almost 100 years when we were at FIU. And being a brand new school, we wanted to do things differently. I developed a department called the Department of Humanities, Health, and Society. And the reason I did that was get rid of silos. I got sick and tired of telling me who really was a primary care doctor. We're here to train MDs and then get them into the workforce. 70% of our students, when we were at FIU, only got into FIU. It's a startup school. 55% of our class was underrepresented minority. We're the second most diverse medical school in the country. 35% were first generation college. Every single graduating class we had until we left in 2020 had the highest pass rates for step 1 and step 2 and the highest scores, as well as the highest match rate. So what I was seeing was our criteria for admitting medical students is flawed. We're throwing away talent, and we become a profession that's way too elitist. 81% of American medical students come from families that are in the top 2 quintiles of income in this country. Yet we are supposed to be preparing physicians and healthcare providers that are going to go out there and help and improve the health of an entire nation, a nation that is divided economically, divided in so many issues. And if we really want health equity as physicians, we're probably the least important in contributing to health equity. It's all the social determinants. It's the same problems we have within our profession that exist in society. The disparities, the sexism, the racism, the xenophobia, the elitism. And we should be the ones in our profession that lead the charge to change that. These are not easy changes. These are things that are ingrained in our culture and academia. I mean, what's the old expression? Why are academic walls, hospital walls so clean? It's because doctors have to walk with their backs to them. Let's change this. Let's be this honorable profession we're supposed to be. And if you want to be a dean, it's simple leadership qualities that you have to be there. You have to listen. You have to resolve, but you have to have a vision and a mission. The one that is also followed through with all your faculty and students. It's a wonderful opportunity. You have great minds coming into our profession. Let's make us as great as we really can be.
Denise, if I could sort of summarize what the 3 deans have said, we all came at it in a very unusual way. The majority of deans, and thanks to the work of Carrie Byington, who's now the chief for California Health, University of California Health, she documented that 80% of deans come through a chairmanship. Okay, that's the usual manner for a dean to come in, to be the chair of a department, and then to become a vice dean for a particular area, and then to go through a series of search committees and vie for being a dean. But if you notice, the 3 Latino deans, whether they be on the screen or in person, didn't come through those directions. And so I'm gonna reiterate and underline a point that David Acosta did. I was so glad to hear him quote the work of Juana Bordas. Okay, we lead differently. We lead differently. There's 10 points that define Hispanic physicians and Hispanic leadership. It's different. We're community-centered. We have cultural identity, okay? It's not about us, it's about you. And therefore, sometimes we have to come at it at a different angle. And let me capture that angle, because I had a question yesterday from somebody. What does it take to be a dean? It takes problem resolution. And how do you get the rest of the training to be a dean? Well, you can go through the Council of Deans, but you have to come to the attention of your dean in order to go through the Council of Deans Fellowship. You have to come to the attention of your program director to become the assistant program director. And how do you come to the attention of those people? By saying sí. Say yes. Sí se puede. I can do that. Yeah. Can you stand outside for 3 hours? Yeah, I can stand outside for 3 hours. I'll keep knocking on the door, but I'll stand outside for 3 hours. Can you lead this team of medical students on the floor? Yeah, I can do that. And by saying that and serving in committees and padding your resume, you come to the attention of leadership. And little by little, people recognize que sí se puede, that you can do it, that you can lead that committee, that you can lead that task force, that you can lead. And then you begin to ascend the academic ladder. And so I want to sort of close this part of the discussion about how we got in by recognizing that some of us were trained by our families. Notice trained, okay, to lead differently. It's a cultural thing. We lead differently, and to capture a dicho. My parents always told me, no tengas ambición. Don't have ambition. Wrong. That's a bad translation. Okay. Ambición is not ambition. Ambition is a good thing. It's a driver of success. Ambición is a vulgarity. Because if you have ambición, you're going to leave your people behind. No, mijo. Eso ya es ambición. Okay. To leave people behind. And so if you retain your cultural values, you bring your people along. And that was a difference that it took me a long time to understand. Because in order to be a dean, in order to become to the attention of leadership, you have to do something that we do very naturally. You have to have academic swagger. Okay? It's a facial thing, right? Sí, yo puedo. I can do that. Dean, can you lead the program? Claro que sí. All right. Academic swagger. But it reflects on the CV. It reflects in the positions that you hold. And that's how you get to be a dean. Denise, next question.
No, wonderful. Thank you so much. And that's actually a perfect segue into our next question. So, obviously, historically and currently, there aren't a lot of folks with LHS Plus identity who are in these positions. And so wanted to ask you, what are some of the unique opportunities and challenges that you have, especially related to your LHS Plus identity in this type of leadership role?
I think, well, I'm sorry, I just stepped all over my colleagues.
Go on. Go ahead.
We also like to dance. Notice the alliteration with I stepped all over my colleagues and I like to make
stepping all over your colleagues would not be considered dancing.
Well, I was going to make an allegory to an American saying. Yes, Americans have dichos también. Okay. We're like Ginger Rogers. Okay. Nobody recognizes for what good dancers we are, what good leaders we are, because we have to do it backwards and in heels, right? I mean, you've heard that about our women leaders. She made Fred Rogers look good, or Fred Astaire. That's the real challenge. Okay. Nobody recognizes our leadership potential because we lead differently. Ginger Rogers danced differently. I think the whole idea is the biggest challenge, as we've heard all day, is having the central powers recognize our leadership potential. And the only way to come up against that and demonstrate leadership potential is by saying sí. Sí se puede. I can do that. We can do that. And we all do it together. The other story that I want to tell, and Joe, I'm gonna apologize for stealing a Vietnam story.
Go take it. We
So-
lost that. We lost that one.
But we got a good dicho out of it. Okay, a good dicho coming from Vietnam was leave the ladder down. Okay, and for those of us who are the same age, we recognize what that meant, because our fathers, tios, uncles, and grandfathers fought in that war. And the way you got out of trouble is you called in an airstrike. And if you got into real trouble, you called in a helicopter. And the helicopter would come into the rice paddy and throw down a ladder. And you would hightail it to grab that ladder. And I want every one of you to hightail it when you see that ladder coming. But then don't do what comes naturally and pull the ladder up. Because the natural thing to do is, let's go, vámonos, I'm safe. Yeah, let's go. That's what leaders is about. There used to be no ladder, first of all. There was no helicopter there. That young man right there just invented a couple of ladders and helicopters. When we were in LMSA, there were no deans. I'm going to correct your statement, your count. There's 5 Hispanic deans now. Joe is a dean in waiting. So if you count Joe, there's 5. But isn't it sad that you can count them on your fingers? 6, I'm sorry, 6. But leave that ladder down. Continue to create a career path for those who follow and those who are there, and don't leave your community behind. Sorry, Joe, I took your story, didn't I?
No, actually, that was a great story. Olga, please.
Well, I want to share a challenge that I have had as a dean, and probably it's a challenge that I share with the whole academic community in Puerto Rico. And it's the fact that still we have people in the mainland and leaders in the mainland that do not recognize Puerto Rican medical schools as schools that are LCME accredited, and they confuse us with international medical schools. So I think that has been a big issue, and we have worked on that, and I have worked on that, and the WMC has helped me with it, as well as the ACDME, but the confusion still remains, and we still have students that present to us the fact that they apply to a residency program, and their application is withdrawn and not considered because they come from international medical schools. Last year, I had a student that applied to a national organization, and he was rejected because he was not from an LCME school. So that's a big challenge, and I think that it translates to cultural and recognition within the mainland, and this is not only Hispanic, but it's particular to Puerto Rico. So I think it's been something important, and I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight it, because you're there and you can share the message to everybody about who we are, what we do. And at this moment, I have to, with a lot of pride, say that the 4 medical schools in Puerto Rico are the main producers of Hispanic Latino physicians in the mainland. Currently, I have 97% of my students are Latino. Okay, the others, in fact, my diversity policy speaks about having non-Hispanics within our student body so that they can get the experience and be with students from other nationalities and ethnicities. However, we still continue, and we're very proud about Hispanic background and how we are able, which is one of our successes, to be able to provide physicians for Puerto Rico and the mainland, and in the mainland specifically for Hispanic Latino population, and let's say the close to 6 million Puerto Ricans that we have in the mainland. So that has been a big challenge for me as a dean and for all deans in the island. that I wanted to share with you.
And although all that goes back to a lot of the
Mhm.
same racism that exists in the country
Mhm.
and xenophobia that exists out there.
Mhm.
And the opportunity to be a dean is very interesting. I was offered an interview at various spots, but I was looking for some place where I could start from scratch with a blank sheet of paper, because I think that there's too many things we need to change. And right now, one of the first things we did, both ourselves and Claremont University, KGI, was develop, as they're starting a medical school, and we're working very closely to them. And we're even talking about starting 2 medical schools under one umbrella in 2 different states so that we can increase the diversity. And one of the ways that we do that is make sure your students are well prepared. Some people have certificate programs, others have master's program. What we have done here and in California is develop master's programs feeding in from the state schools, because that's where you're going to get the majority of your underrepresented minorities. I'm particularly targeting first-gen students and prepare them for medical school. Because the difference is it's not just, in my opinion, having more Hispanics in leadership positions, but those that have experiences that are different than the mainstream. Those that bring to the front, you guys, let me tell you what it was like to be on Medicaid. And we worked our way out of this. But we're not preparing our medical students to take care of this entire country or the world. Look at the statistics we have here. This is an American medical school phenomenon. After the 3rd year, empathy drops to the floor and it stays there.
Mhm.
What are we doing wrong? Are we offering the right support systems within the medical school for medical students, and particularly those that are first generation college? Are we preparing them with the right tools to become physicians? Definitely taking organic chemistry is not one of those tools. I, as a chemistry and physics major, am saying, I'm really glad I majored in those 2 things because I never really used them. And so we have to really look introspectively as ourselves as physicians, as educators, as an institution, and see what can we change to improve the outcomes. I'm tired of the conversations of Black and brown people. We need more of them so they can go back to their communities and work. The reality is people will go back to their communities. But what are we saying? That we want Black and brown folks to take the lower paying jobs? Because that's where you are with your FQHC, and overwork them without the support. Because that's where we come from. And does Will Smith III, who's from Manhattan, get Wall Street? Shouldn't we be training all physicians to take care of everybody? And who better to say that than those of us that come from underrepresented minorities? I'm a super underrepresented minority. For God's sakes, I'm not just Hispanic. I happen to be a Democratic Cuban. There's 4 of us, and we meet on a phone booth on 8th Street in Miami. It gets really quiet. So I think that if you get to be a dean, take full advantage of the power of that leadership to make effective change. Remember, we're here to train the future workforce of healthcare, and they're the ones that are going to make the change, not us. We're going to train them. And are we giving them the right type of educational basis to be able to do that? And that I say, always ask that question. As a leader, always ask yourself, am I doing a good job? Am I being as inclusive as I'm saying we're supposed to be? Just like Manny was saying, are we listening? Can we resolve conflicts? Because you guys, this is as political a position as you get. You know, Virchow once said that politics was nothing more than medicine on a much grander scale. And, you know, I mean, from my own ethnic background, I'm Cuban, I'm Irish, I'm Catholic, I'm a physician, and I'm in academic medicine. The 5 most political entities that have existed on this earth. So if that doesn't prepare you to be a leader, I don't know what does. But the idea is make a change. Be a leader for change. If any time in the world history we need that, or at least in my own life history, I thought it was back in the 60s and 70s we needed it. The truth is we need it more now. And so if you're going to be in that position, and you're going to be in a position of leadership, just if you have an MD or a DO behind your name, take advantage of that. Don't be afraid. Now, all of a sudden, you're making a nice income, but who's speaking for those that aren't? Are you willing to stand up and advocate for policies that improve people's health, housing, transportation, environmental? Are we willing to stand up and say those are things that need to change? Or are we willing to say, no, we're just going to produce doctors and leave the same disparities that we have? So that, I'm just saying, take advantage of it if you can get that and make a difference.
Well, thank you. We have a couple of minutes for questions, and either virtually, so feel free to put some in the chat, or anybody here in the audience, I'll have to make sure to repeat just so that we can have everybody here. Oh, JP.
So outstanding presentation.
Or JP, would you mind going to the mic?
Yes, please, so that we can hear you.
Outstanding presentations, and I just want to extend a huge thank you from LMSA, because as deans, you're extremely busy. A quick comment and a question. So to Dr. Rodriguez's point, we have been aware for decades that the students in Puerto Rico have faced unfair discrimination, being viewed as international students, and international students shouldn't be discriminated against, but definitely not the students in Puerto Rico, since the 4 medical schools are LCME. I think it's time to have a Puerto Rican task force. The reality is that letters have been sent out by the AAMC to each of the schools saying, stop discriminating against the medical students from Puerto Rico, and nothing has changed. What changes is when it's documented and reported and schools are cited. When schools receive a citation, everything changes. And so I really encourage for LMSA to work with the 4 deans in Puerto Rico to come up with a system of documenting, reporting, and elevating visibility of these cases, because the only way it's going to stop is if we put a number to it and start documenting differently. So I want us to think about that.
I mean, with the idea, and thank you. Okay, you can follow up on that.
Absolutely. And then the second commonality is that the other thing I'll mention is that unlike the HBCUs that have produced probably the greatest number of African-American and Black deans of medical schools, HSIs and the 4 medical schools in Puerto Rico are not recognized for producing talent to lead our medical schools. And I think that's something that we need to consider. Why is it that HSIs and the 4 medical schools of Puerto Rico are not asked, who are your candidates to lead our medical schools, both osteopathic and allopathic? The commonality also that the 3 of you have, I think, and I could be wrong, is that you really had to found your own medical schools. 2 of you are founding deans of medical schools. And Dr. Rodriguez, the 4 medical schools in Puerto Rico were all founded by Latino communities, right? So what do we need to do as a community to start founding our own medical schools as another way of building a pipeline of LHS plus deans?
JP, let me sort of stand on your shoulders and point out, underline one of the points that you made. HBCUs get recognized as a training ground for African-American deans. Just as an example, in the 10 years that we've been a designated HSI, we've had 4 faculty members leave our institutions to be deans at other schools. And what do they learn but to lead differently, to capitalize on that leadership potential? Whether you're going to be the dean of Mercer, like Dr. Valerie Mallet, okay? Valerie actually was our chair of OB. She left. She was at Mercer for a while. Marjorie Jenkins is the dean at South Carolina. Steve Burke became the dean in Lubbock, longest serving dean for 22 years in Lubbock. But they learned those leadership principles in terms of conflict resolution and being community oriented and community centered at an HSI. That's our niche. Let's capitalize on how we lead differently and focus on our community, on the entire community, and change healthcare in America. This is the time. This is the moment. If not us, again, oh, I'm slipping into, oh my gosh, Robert Kennedy.
Were any of them LHS plus identified? Of the three individuals that you just mentioned, which were LHS plus identified?
Valerie is Latino, African American, very specifically. Okay. And I'm sorry, I said Valerie, I meant Veronica. She goes by Vero.
And I just want to add that as we, or as anybody becomes in a position of dean, please realize that this mammoth organization called academic medicine has to shift in the way we train our future for our workforce. We're still using methodologies and teaching that were used when I was a student. But the reality is, you don't have to memorize as much as you used to. The world is much more complex than it used to be. We have to train physicians not to be afraid of analytics. We have to train physicians exactly in the social determinants of health, which has never really been part of the curriculum, but that's causing 80-90% of the diseases in this country. And unless you learn about that and how to put a team together, guess what? You're not going to get paid. It's going to be a value-based reimbursement. And it's important to start to look at all these different things, because the one problem that I see in medical education is that we have never defined what a good physician is. So how do you produce a product when you don't have a set definition? So define what you feel is the best physician, not just the best clinician or the best academician, but who has the right type of personality to be a physician. Do they really listen? Are we willing to shake up the system to really bring health and improve health to everybody? So we have to be able to prepare our future workforce to deal not just within the poorest of neighborhoods, but personalized medicine and all the technology that goes along with it. So we really need to see how we're going to change, how we're going to do that. Because the other thing that in academic medicine, which the majority of academicians have never been in the real world of practicing medicine. So they're isolated in that silo of what our academic health center is. But we're preparing people to be outside of that. So we have to start looking at the industry, what is going on, what are the trends going on there? And there's some health systems out there that do a great job with that. You have the Geisinger system, you have the Intermountain West system, you have the Kaiser Permanente. So, let's see what these institutions are doing. By the way, they're starting their own medical schools. You have the Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine, which I'm one of their trustees out in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and we helped put together the school at Kaiser Permanente. They also have a great advantage in bringing in underrepresented minorities. They can afford their tuition. So there's fundamental changes we need to make within our own profession to be able to get to our end point, to be as diverse as we could be as a profession.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
So I understand the problem of Puerto Rico, right? So Dr. Sanchez mentioned something about to create a task force for the universities in Puerto Rico. But I think that the problem is not only from Puerto Rico. The problem is from Venezuela, from Ecuador, from Colombia. So I believe that a task force, involving all these countries will be very beneficial, not only for Puerto Rico, but for the other institutions that are, outside the United States, umbrella. It's just a thought, because I think that the reason why I'm saying this is because early in the morning, I said that in Colombia, there are a lot of physicians who wants to come here just to train for 6 months, for 1 year, and go back to Colombia or, just to practice. So I think that if we're going to think big, we need to, make something that is going to create an impact now that we are celebrating the 50th anniversary.
Down at the University of Miami, Dr. William Harrington, God rest his soul, hematologist, the world famous hematologist. Anyways, he started a Latin American program at the University of Miami Jackson Memorial Hospital, where graduates of Central and South American the medical schools were brought up and trained and then sent. The problem that occurred was they did the training, but about 70% of them wanted to stay in the United States. So the program became a problem there because the money was put aside to help improve the area they came from. But, you know, that's what happened with that program. But I think your idea is excellent. And I'm a big believer that if you have the opportunity to make a change, do it. It's somebody else's life. And somebody had asked a question about how do we put pressure on outside entities to commit to these communities? Well, we live in a capitalist society and we let this whole healthcare thing go haywire with money, and they're making all sorts of profits. And at the same time, people are being left out. If you're going to work at a large health organization, pick one of the good ones. I personally like the not-for-profits, but some of the not-for-profits are just the same way as the for-profits. And, you know, this is a battle we're going to keep going on, folks. So get ready, drink some Cuban coffee, get the energy, keep going. And by the way, the Cuban coffee is really good, especially when we were students, because if the coffee didn't keep you up, the stomachache did. But
Denise, let me provide a transition for the rest of the meeting, and JP, you can give me my $1 later for being the transition guy. I think what we need to think about over the next remaining day and a half is what role can we play that's very specific and different in terms of leadership, in terms of recognizing ourselves as different, reveling in that difference, and taking that mental jiu-jitsu to turn that into an advantage. I would therefore argue that there are other entities that provide support to international medical graduates. But what our colleague in Puerto Rico is highlighting, and I'm not sure we're hearing it, the difference in Puerto Rico is they're not international medical graduates.
Mhm.
Okay. And the support that we're lending to Puerto Rico are for American citizens, American graduates, in American certified LCME schools to find positions within our residency programs. The AMA has a beautiful international medical graduate group. They are very active. They fill that space wonderfully. One of the spaces that we need to fill is the advocacy for our Puerto Rican colleagues. One of the spaces that we need to fill is to build that mentorship support ladder, not only for our medical students, but for our residents and for our young faculty. We haven't come to unity on that. Who's going to take that role? I think that's a great role for LMSA, but let's talk about it. Let's cuss and discuss about it over the next day and a half and come up with a resolution, maybe right before the gala. Right? Typical
Right.
Mexican. Right before the party, you know. Anyway, but let that serve as a transition for the rest of the conference, because in the hallways, in the byways, in the chats, that's where ideas are born. And that's the beauty of being able to be here together with our masks down, having the discussions about what are we going to do for the next 50 years. And I want to applaud that young man over there, busily working, for pulling us together on this. Thank you, Denise.
And by the way, I just want to say one thing in praise of Ponce. I did a talk there 25 years ago for AOA. And for those of you that have never been to Ponce, go there. By the way, Ponce happens to have the greatest collection of pre-Baroque art this side of the Atlantic. So it's an extremely cultural, beautiful town. It's on the coast. And you guys also, they have some great artists there too. But I just that was a great city. So you're lucky to be there.
Thank you, Pedro. And I invite everybody to come to Ponce. And I really appreciate all of the positive comments in favor of our students from Puerto Rico. We always embrace our friends from other countries or other Latino countries. And we look into ways also to help those to navigate the process to enter the U.S. system. But I deeply appreciate the unique issue that our students from Puerto Rico have when they reach out and try to get positions into residency programs in the mainland. So I'm very grateful for your support and your words.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank you.
I vote we all have a task force meeting at Ponce next time. Probably.
Yeah, sure. And I invite you to come to the school and visit us.
Well, wonderful. We appreciate you all, and thank you so much. Seriously, just so wonderful. Thank you so much.